My name is Clara Hayes, and I'm 26 years old, a newly graduated nurse with big dreams I've carried since childhood. When my mom, Rachel, died 13 years ago, my life shifted in ways I could never have imagined. I went to live with my Aunt Linda Carter, who never let me forget that. In her eyes, I was nothing but a financial burden. And then this happened that I never expected. When I graduated college, instead of receiving a heartfelt congratulatory card or a gift to mark my achievement, I received something that made my heart stop: an envelope containing a detailed invoice for $50,000. According to Linda, that was the cost of raising me. Now, I sit in a courtroom, staring at my own aunt across the aisle as she sues me for the expenses of my childhood. My mind keeps repeating the same question. How did life bring us here? If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're from. Leave a comment down below. Hit that like and subscribe button and tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone in your own family like this? Before everything shattered, my childhood was filled with warmth and love. My mom, Rachel Hayes, raised me alone after my dad passed away when I was just 3 years old. Money was always tight in our small two-bedroom apartment, but Mom made sure I never truly felt it. She worked long, exhausting shifts as a nurse at Memorial Hospital. But every night, she came home with stories of saving lives and comforting people in their darkest hours. Her words planted a seed in me, a dream of one day becoming a nurse myself, just like her. Every weekend with Mom was magical, our special time together. On Saturdays, we would bake cookies in our tiny kitchen, the sweet smell of vanilla and chocolate chips filling every corner of the apartment. On Sundays, we often walked to the local park to feed the ducks at the pond, or visited the library to get lost among the shelves of books. Mom always told me, "Clara, education is the one thing nobody can ever take from you." She would say that while helping me with my homework at our old wooden kitchen table. Her words stuck with me, a promise that no matter how hard life got, learning could open doors. Our walls were covered with my colorful drawings and school certificates. To anyone else, they were just papers and doodles, but to Mom, they were treasures. Every day, I brought home went straight to the refrigerator, held up by fruit-shaped magnets. She'd twirl me around the kitchen in celebration, laughing like we had just won the lottery. For my 10th birthday, she gave me a children's medical kit. One of those little sets with a toy stethoscope and thermometer. I carried it everywhere, checking the heartbeat of my stuffed animals, even pretending to treat Mom when she had a long day at work. She'd smile and say, "One day, you'll wear the real thing, Clara." Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was filled with love. Mom worked extra shifts on holidays so she could give me Christmas mornings, filled with wonder and birthday parties that made me feel special. She taught me to appreciate what we had instead of focusing on what we lacked. Whenever I complained about not having the latest toys or clothes like my classmates, she'd gently remind me, gratitude makes any life rich. But everything changed the summer I turned 12. That summer, I noticed something different about Mom. She came home looking more exhausted than usual, her face pale, her movements slower. At first, she said it was because she was working extra shifts, but soon, the truth became impossible to ignore. She began losing weight quickly. A cough lingered, harsh and constant. I would catch her wincing in pain when she thought I wasn't watching, and sometimes I'd see her quietly take painkillers late at night, when she believed I was asleep. The day she finally went to the doctor, I stayed at our neighbor Mrs. Bennett's apartment, trying to finish a science project, but unable to focus. When Mom returned, I knew something was terribly wrong before she even spoke. Her face told me everything. The words she whispered crushed me. Stage 4 lung cancer. Terminal. 6 months to a year. It was like a wrecking ball had slammed into our happy little world. Mom tried to keep things normal, but our roles slowly reversed. I became her little caretaker. At just 12 years old, I started cooking dinner, doing laundry, and helping her into bed when she was too weak to walk. I carried a small notebook everywhere, carefully writing down her medication schedule, determined not to miss a dose. School no longer mattered the way it used to. What mattered was being by her side, protecting the little energy she had left. My shoulders carried not only the groceries and laundry, but also the terrifying dread of knowing what was coming. My friends stopped inviting me out, but I didn't care. Every second with Mom became precious. Every laugh, every story, every hug. Soon, a hospice nurse began visiting every day when Mom could no longer get out of bed. I would sit beside her, reading her favorite books or just holding her fragile hand. She would whisper, "You're so strong, Clara. Promise me you'll keep going. Keep shining, even after I'm gone." And then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, just 3 weeks after my 13th birthday, I held her hand as she took her last breath. The hospice nurse found me still sitting there an hour later, unable to let go. The world had never felt so empty. The funeral was a blur. Black clothes, unfamiliar faces, and the weight of pitying looks from people I barely knew. Strangers hugged me, whispering empty words about Mom being in a better place. But what place could be better than with me? That's when my aunt, Linda Carter, appeared. She was Mom's younger sister, though they had never been especially close. Linda had always been distant, showing up only on rare holidays with fancy gifts and short, awkward visits. Now, at the funeral, she placed a hand on my shoulder and loudly assured everyone, "Don't worry, I'll take care of her." The social worker spoke with Linda and my elderly grandmother, who lived in a senior community and wasn't able to take me in. The decision was made quickly. I would move in with Linda, her husband Thomas, and their daughter Brianna. Linda acted so caring in front of the social worker, promising a loving home during my difficult transition. But deep down, something about her polished smile unsettled me. As I packed my childhood into cardboard boxes, I found a letter tucked inside one of my favorite books. It was from Mom. "Remember who you are, Clara. Life will throw storms your way, but you have the strength to weather them all. I'll love you always, even when you can't see me anymore." I folded that letter and tucked it into my pocket, pressing it close to my heart. Then, with one last look at our small apartment, I stepped into a completely different life, one I wasn't prepared for. The drive to Aunt Linda's house took almost 3 hours. Each mile pulled me further from everything familiar, leaving behind not only my hometown, but also the life Mom had built for us. Linda's luxury SUV felt like a cage as I stared out the window. She occasionally made comments like, "Life will be much better now, Clara. You'll see. You'll have opportunities you never had before." But I wasn't convinced. Aunt Linda and Uncle Thomas lived in an impressive 2-story colonial house with tall white columns and a front lawn trimmed like it came straight out of a magazine. On the outside, everything looked picture perfect. Their daughter, Brianna, was 15 years old, stylish, and carried herself with a kind of polished confidence that felt rehearsed. She greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes. Uncle Thomas, a tall man with thinning hair and a permanent look of disinterest, shook my hand briefly before disappearing back into his office. He seemed like the type of man who avoided conflict by pretending not to see it. "This will be your room," Linda said, as she opened the door to a small space at the end of the hallway, far from the other bedrooms. The walls were plain white, the furniture mismatched and obviously secondhand, compared to the pink walls and designer furniture I glimpsed in Brianna's room. "We can add some color later, maybe," Linda said with a half smile, as though decorating my room was more of a burden than a plan. That first night, Linda prepared a big dinner. Everyone acted polite. Uncle Thomas asked about my interests, and Linda even shared a few memories about Mom from when they were kids. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement could work out. But the shift came quickly. By the end of my first week, Linda handed me a typed sheet of house rules. A long list. Rules that somehow didn't seem to apply to Brianna. I had a strict curfew, timed bathroom use, designated study hours, and a chore list that seemed to grow longer every day. In this house, everyone contributes, Linda explained while handing me a toilet brush. Meanwhile, Brianna lounged by their backyard pool with her friends, untouched by chores or restrictions. My belongings, the pieces of my old life that once filled our little apartment, looked small and out of place in that stark room. Before I even had the chance to unpack, Linda had gone through my boxes, setting aside clothes she called too worn, inappropriate. When I asked where they were, she gave me a cold smile. We have standards in this neighborhood, Clara. You represent our family now. School was no easier. My academic records transferred, but nothing else did. I was placed in standard classes even though I'd always been in advanced programs before. When I complained, Linda brushed me off. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You've been through a trauma. Best to take it easy. The first time I really understood my place in that house came during school supply shopping. Brianna received everything brand new, a laptop, a designer backpack, and top of the line supplies. Me, I got a plastic binder, plain notebooks, and pens from the dollar store. When she saw the disappointment on my face, Linda only said, "We have to be mindful of expenses, Clara. Your mother didn't leave much for your care." That night, I heard Linda and Uncle Thomas arguing through the thin walls. The Social Security checks barely cover the extra expenses. Linda's voice was sharp. Do you know how much teenagers eat? How much their activities cost? Uncle Thomas's voice came back, tired and resigned. She's family, Linda. What do you expect us to do? Amanda wasn't exactly responsible, not planning better for her daughter. I buried my face into my pillow, clutching Mom's letter as tears soaked through the fabric. That was the beginning of a cruel pattern. The money comments became a constant echo in that house. If I outgrew clothes, I was reminded of how expensive it was to replace them. If I needed extra school supplies, Linda sighed about how much I was costing her. Even at dinner, if I ate what she considered too much, she would make a remark about how much food I consumed. When the dentist recommended braces, Linda muttered, "Do you know how much braces cost?" We walked out of the office without scheduling an appointment. When I brought home information about nursing programs at different universities, she complained about the cost of college applications. $70 for one application. Maybe community college would be more appropriate for your situation. Meanwhile, Brianna's life was filled with luxuries. For her 16th birthday, she got a brand new car. I was told I could get a job if I wanted transportation. Her room was redecorated every season. My bedspread was the same faded blue one since I had arrived. She attended dance classes, lacrosse practice, and SAT prep courses. I was told there was no budget for me to join any activities. Uncle Thomas saw everything but never truly stepped in. Sometimes he'd slip me $20 or offer to drive me somewhere when Linda refused, but he never directly challenged her. Your aunt is under a lot of pressure, he'd say, as if that explained everything. Through it all, I clung to the memory of Mom's warmth, her laugh, her encouraging words, her pride in me. Those memories kept me going through Linda's coldness and Brianna's casual cruelty. But I was already learning a painful truth. I wasn't wanted in that house. To survive, I started spending more time at the school library. It became my safe haven, a place where Linda's watchful, critical eyes couldn't reach me. I volunteered for any activity that would keep me at school longer. Study groups, tutoring, even helping teachers after class. That's when I discovered something important. If I couldn't have love in that house, I could at least have achievement. My grades became my escape. Every A felt like a small rebellion against Linda's constant attempts to make me feel small. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen, as part of my endless list of chores, I accidentally knocked over Linda's purse. As I gathered up the spilled contents, I found a letter from the Social Security Administration, addressed to her as my guardian. My eyes froze on the words. It mentioned monthly survivor benefits being deposited for my care, and the amount was much higher than what Linda had ever claimed. I carefully placed everything back, but that night, I sat on my bed staring at my mother's photo, which Linda had once told me to put away, to help with the grieving process. Instead, I set it right back on my nightstand, looked into Mom's smiling eyes, and made a silent promise I would endure. I would succeed. And one day, I would escape this house. High school brought new challenges, but also new chances to prove myself. Despite Linda constantly dismissing me, I fought to be placed in honors classes. I worked hard, and before long, my teachers recognized that I belonged there. My science teachers especially noticed my focus and ability, and by sophomore year, I had joined the Health Sciences Club, the very first step toward my dream of becoming a nurse, just like Mom. Linda was less than thrilled. "Another club. I suppose you'll need money for that too," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. But I had stopped asking her for money. Instead, I found my own way. I got a part-time job at Sweet Blossoms Bakery, working after school 3 afternoons a week and all day Saturday. The owner, Mrs. Patel, quickly became one of the bright spots in my life. She would slip me extra pastries at the end of the day and adjust my schedule whenever exams came around. The day I received my first paycheck, I held it in my hands like it was freedom itself. But that feeling didn't last long. Linda cornered me in the kitchen, her expression cold and calculating. "Now that you're earning income, you'll need to contribute to the household. $300 monthly for room and board seems fair." $300, nearly half of what I made. But I handed it over without a fight. I had already learned the hard way that arguing with Linda only made things worse. That night, I overheard her telling Uncle Thomas how she was teaching Clara financial responsibility by charging her rent. My heart ached, but I stayed quiet. By then, Brianna had become the queen bee of our high school. She was popular, confident, and always surrounded by friends. And she never missed a chance to remind everyone that I was her charity case cousin. She would tell stories about my mom's death, twisting the details to make people pity me, or worse, to mock me. When boys showed even the slightest interest in me, she'd warn them, "Careful. Clara has family drama. She's probably messed up." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let them break me. One rainy Tuesday during my junior year, I stayed late to make up a chemistry lab. By the time I packed my things, the last bus had already left. As I trudged along the sidewalk in the downpour, preparing myself for the long 3-mile walk home, a car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and I heard a familiar voice. "Clara, get in before you drown." It was Ms. Reynolds, my AP biology teacher. On the drive home, she asked about my interest in medicine, my study habits, and what I planned to do after high school. As she pulled up in front of Linda's house, she paused before saying, "You remind me of myself at your age. Determined, focused, even with obstacles in your way. My door is always open, if you ever need someone to talk to." Her words stayed with me long after I stepped inside that cold, unfriendly house. 2 weeks later, Linda pushed me past my breaking point. She had confiscated half of my paycheck, claiming it was for utilities I use excessively. That day at school, I found myself standing outside Ms. Reynolds' classroom during lunch. My hands shook as I knocked, and when she invited me in, the words spilled out before I could stop them. I told her everything: the financial manipulation, the endless chores, the emotional neglect, and the letter I had once seen about the Social Security benefits Linda was collecting. Ms. Reynolds listened quietly, her face growing more and more troubled. Finally, she leaned forward and asked, "Clara, have you considered that your aunt may be misusing funds meant for your care?" The thought had crossed my mind many times, but hearing it said out loud by an adult gave it a kind of power. "What can I even do?" I whispered. "I'm a minor. She's my legal guardian." Her response changed everything. "Then you document. You keep records. And in the meantime, we'll work on scholarship options to get you out of here the moment you graduate." From that day forward, I became obsessed with preparing for my future. With Ms. Reynolds' help, I began researching nursing scholarships. I joined every club that could strengthen my applications. I volunteered at the local hospital on Sundays, and somehow, I managed to maintain perfect grades, despite working nearly 20 hours a week. Every step forward felt like a small crack in the cage Linda had built around me. One evening, while looking for a stapler in Uncle Thomas's office, I stumbled across a folder with my name written on it. Inside were years of Social Security statements. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. The truth was undeniable. For years, Linda had been receiving over $1,000 every month for my care. By the time I added it all up, the total was nearly $60,000. Yet, I was wearing secondhand clothes, eating the cheapest food, and even paying rent from my part-time job. My chest tightened as I snapped photos of every page with my phone. I carefully put everything back, then rushed to my room, my heart racing. That night, I emailed the photos to myself and to Ms. Reynolds, creating a backup. I stared at Mom's photo on my nightstand and whispered, "I won't let this break me. I'll get out, Mom. I promise." Senior year came faster than I expected. With Miss Reynolds guiding me, I poured everything into scholarship applications. I volunteered more, joined new programs, and wrote essays late into the night. Meanwhile, Linda intercepted every acceptance letter that arrived, waving them in my face with smug remarks. "These programs are expensive. You'll drown in debt. Nursing school is unrealistic." But in April, I finally got the breakthrough I had been praying for. A thick envelope came in the mail, and this time I managed to grab it before Linda. Inside was the best news of my life: a full ride nursing scholarship to State University, tuition, housing, meals, even a stipend for books. I clutched that letter like it was a lifeline. For the first time in years, I felt free. When I called Ms. Reynolds with the news, I could barely contain my excitement. "I got it. I'm free," I whispered, tears in my eyes. Graduation day should have been a celebration, but Linda found ways to sour even that. She complained about the cost of my cap and gown. She criticized the waste of ordering graduation announcements. She even mocked the nursing program I had chosen, calling it impractical. Meanwhile, Brianna, who had just returned from her first year at an expensive private college, completely funded by her parents, rolled her eyes at everything I said. On the day of the ceremony, I scanned the crowd, hoping to see at least one supportive face from my so-called family. The section where Linda and Uncle Thomas should have been sitting was empty. But when I walked across the stage and accepted my diploma, I heard cheers from the back of the auditorium. There they were, Ms. Reynolds and Mrs. Patel, the bakery owner. They clapped and shouted my name as though I was their own. Afterward, Ms. Reynolds handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a professional stethoscope, the kind real nurses use. Her card read, "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." I know I am. For the first time since Mom's death, I felt truly seen. Walking back to Linda's house with the stethoscope in my bag and my diploma in my hand, I knew something important. I was only weeks away from a new beginning. The day I moved into my college dorm felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. State University was only 40 miles from Linda's house, but it felt like another planet. My dorm room was small, with plain cinder-block walls and stiff furniture, but to me, it represented something priceless: freedom. My roommate, Sophie Kim, arrived with her parents, who helped her unpack boxes and decorate her side of the room with fairy lights and colorful posters. They even offered to help with my things, but my entire life fit into just 2 suitcases and a backpack. Linda didn't even bother to come inside. She pulled up to the campus entrance, popped the trunk, and said, "Text when you're settled. And remember, your scholarship doesn't cover holiday breaks. If you plan on staying with us then, we'll need to discuss compensation." With that, she drove away. Sophie quickly noticed the contrast between us. Her family called her every day, sent care packages stuffed with snacks, and constantly checked in on how she was adjusting. When she realized I never got calls or packages, she quietly began sharing hers with me. My mom always sends too much anyway, she'd say as she divided cookies or toiletries between us. College life was demanding. Early morning clinicals, endless studying, late nights of practice exams. But I thrived under the pressure. Every time I put on my scrubs, I thought of Mom and the promise I had made to her. To cover small expenses not included in my scholarship, I worked at the campus coffee shop during the week and took weekend shifts at a nearby assisted living facility. I barely thought about Linda anymore. And honestly, that was exactly how I wanted it. But even though I had escaped, Linda still found ways to remind me she wasn't finished with me. Right before Thanksgiving break my freshman year, she called. "Since you're not contributing financially anymore, we'll need compensation for your stay. $300 for the week seems fair." "Food isn't free, Clara." I hung up, my stomach in knots. How many extra shifts would I need just to afford a holiday with family? Sophie overheard the conversation. When I put my phone down, she gave me a look that was equal parts sympathy and disbelief. "Don't even think about it. Come home with me instead. My parents would love to have you." That Thanksgiving became the first of many holidays I spent with Sophie's family, the Kims. They welcomed me without hesitation, pulling me into family photos and teaching me their traditions. Her mom, learning I was studying nursing, shared stories from her own career as a physical therapist. Her dad taught me how to make his famous kimchi pancakes, laughing patiently as I struggled to flip them. For the first time in years, I felt what real family warmth was like again. When Linda called at Christmas, demanding to know when I'd arrive with room and board money, I calmly told her I had made other arrangements. There was silence on the line, followed by her cold, clipped response, "You'll regret this, Clara." But instead of fear, I felt something new, relief. Spring semester brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. I was accepted into an accelerated nursing program that would let me finish my degree in 3 years instead of 4. The workload was intense, but my determination only grew stronger. At a campus career fair, I met someone who would change my life, Ethan Lawson, a tall medical student with kind eyes and an easy confidence. We struck up a conversation about pediatric care, and before long, we were meeting for coffee between classes. Our talk stretched for hours, about patient advocacy, medical ethics, and our personal journeys. One afternoon, Ethan shared something that struck me deeply. "My dad's a surgeon. He expects me to follow exactly in his footsteps, but I want to practice family medicine in underserved communities. We've been fighting about it for years." His understanding of family pressure created a bond between us. Eventually, I found the courage to tell him about Linda, about the years of neglect and manipulation. He listened quietly, then asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for years. "Clara, have you ever considered that what she did might actually be illegal? Survivor benefits are supposed to support you, not her." The thought made my heart pound. I had wondered the same thing, but hearing him say it out loud gave it a new weight. That spring break, instead of going home with Sophie's family, I stayed on campus and buried myself in research. What I discovered left me stunned. The library was nearly empty that week, and I spent hours at a computer, digging through legal forums and government websites. I learned that when guardians misused Social Security survivor benefits, it wasn't just unfair, it could actually be considered fraud. Some guardians had even faced criminal charges for doing exactly what Linda had done. With trembling hands, I made an appointment with the university's legal aid office. The student attorney who reviewed my case grew more serious with every detail I shared. I showed him the photos of the benefit statements I had taken from Uncle Thomas's office, along with everything I remembered about Linda's demands for money. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Clara, this isn't just unethical, it's potentially criminal. Your aunt had a fiduciary responsibility to use those funds for your care, not to pocket them for herself." I swallowed hard. "What are my options?" He looked me straight in the eye. "You could file a complaint. maybe even pursue recovery of the funds. But that would mean legal action against your aunt. Think carefully. It's a big step. I left the office with my mind spinning. That night, I called Ms. Reynolds, who was still my trusted mentor even in college. She listened quietly, then said, "You don't need to decide right now. Focus on your studies, Clara. Document everything. The statute of limitations gives you time." Her calm voice settled me. For now, I chose patience. I would build my future first. Junior year brought clinical rotations, and with them, a deeper passion for nursing. Working with real patients, especially children, reminded me daily why I had chosen this path. My professors praised my ability to blend technical skills with compassion, a gift I knew came from watching my mother. Meanwhile, Ethan and I grew closer. We supported each other through exams, late night study sessions, and long clinical hours. That summer, he invited me to meet his parents. I was nervous at first, but Dr. Michael Lawson and Mrs. Ellen Lawson welcomed me warmly. Over dinner, they asked thoughtful questions about my studies and my goals. At one point, Ethan proudly announced, "Clara has the highest GPA in the nursing program." Dr. Lawson raised his glass with a smile. "To excellence and compassion in healthcare. The world needs more providers like the two of you." The contrast between Ethan's family and Linda's treatment of me was overwhelming. For the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be treated not as a burden, but as someone worthy of pride and encouragement. That night, lying in the comfortable guest room of the Lawsons' home, I let myself face the truth I had been burying for years. Linda hadn't just stolen money from me. She had stolen the love and support I should have received as a child. It was a wound I could no longer ignore. As graduation drew closer, doors began opening for me. Job offers poured in, thanks to my academic record, and glowing recommendations from clinical supervisors. I accepted a position at Children's Memorial Hospital, in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. The salary was more than I had ever dreamed of, and for the first time in my life, true financial stability was within reach. 2 weeks before graduation, Ethan surprised me with a picnic by the campus lake, the place where we had shared our first real date. As the sun set, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a vintage sapphire ring that had once belonged to his grandmother. His voice was gentle but sure. "Clara, you don't have to answer right away. I know we're just starting our careers, and timing isn't perfect. But I want a future with you." Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Yes. Absolutely yes." Life finally felt like it was taking shape according to my own design, not Linda's restrictions or manipulations. For the first time since Mom's passing, I believed that the chapter with Linda was closed. But I was wrong. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, the kind of morning that felt symbolic of everything I had fought for. Sophie, Kim, and I helped each other into our caps and gowns, laughing as we took dozens of photos in our dorm one last time. The Kims arrived early with flowers, while Ethan and his parents came carrying a gift bag. Inside was a brand new lab coat embroidered with my name, Clara Hayes, RN. I felt unstoppable until I saw them, walking toward me, dressed in their public appearance. Outfits were Linda, Uncle Thomas, and Brianna. Linda wore her best smile, the kind she saved for when others were watching. "We wouldn't miss our Clara's big day," she announced loudly enough for nearby families to hear, emphasizing our with a possessive edge. She kissed my cheek, then whispered in my ear, "We need to talk after the ceremony." Throughout the graduation, I could feel her eyes on me. When my name was called, I heard her voice rise above the others. "That's my niece. I raised her after her mother died." Afterward, as the graduates scattered to find their families, Linda intercepted me before I could reach the Kims and the Lawsons. "We brought you a graduation gift," she said, pressing a thick envelope into my hands. "Open it now." I did, but instead of a card, it was an itemized invoice. At the top, it read, "Expenses incurred in raising Clara Hayes, 2012-2017. The list was long and carefully typed, broken into neat categories. room and board, 60 months at $500 a month, $30,000 clothing and personal items, 4, $850 school supplies and activities, 3, $275 medical and dental expenses, fifth, $200 transportation and miscellaneous, 6, $675 at the bottom, circled in red pen, was the total $50,000. My hands shook as I looked up at Linda. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the celebration around us. Her smile never faltered. "It's a reality check. Now that you're an adult with a career, it's time to repay what you owe. We made many sacrifices after your mother left you with nothing." Uncle Thomas shifted uncomfortably, but stayed silent. Brianna smirked like this was the punchline to some private joke. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "I don't owe you anything. The government sent you money every month for my care." Linda's smile tightened, her voice sharp, but still sweet enough for onlookers, barely enough to cover the basics. "This reflects the extra expenses. We'll expect monthly payments, starting with your first paycheck." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared at my side, sensing the tension. His arm brushed against mine protectively. "Everything okay here?" Linda's eyes flicked to his expensive watch, and I saw the shift in her expression. She smoothed her tone immediately. "Just a family matter. Clara understands her obligations, but I didn't, and I never would." That evening, I tried to focus on celebrating. Surrounded by the Kims, the Lawsons, and my friends from the nursing program, I forced myself to smile, but my mind kept drifting back to that envelope. Ethan noticed my distraction. Under the table, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." 3 days later, the nightmare escalated. An official-looking letter arrived at my new apartment. It was from a law firm representing Linda Carter, demanding payment of $50,000 for care and support provided to Clara Hayes during her minor years. The letter threatened legal action if a payment plan wasn't established within 30 days. Panic coursed through me. My first instinct was to call Ethan, who immediately got his father involved. Dr. Lawson listened carefully, then said, "Don't respond to anything yet. I'll connect you with a lawyer I trust, who specializes in family law." That's how I met Daniel Brooks. His office was modest, but the walls were lined with diplomas from prestigious universities. He listened as I explained everything, reviewing the invoice and the legal letter with a frown. Finally, he leaned back and said, "This is unusual. Guardians don't sue former wards for basic care expenses, especially when they've already received government benefits for that purpose. There's more to this than what your aunt is claiming. Tell me everything." So I did. For 2 hours, I told him everything about my life with Linda. The constant reminders of my cost, the unequal treatment compared to Brianna, the discovery of the Social Security statements, and the increasing financial demands once I started working. When I finished, Daniel closed his notebook and said firmly, "I'll take your case. And Clara, I don't think you'll owe your aunt a dime." The following weeks became a blur of legal preparation. Daniel filed a counterclaim, firmly denying Linda's right to reimbursement. He also requested financial records tied to my mother's estate and any benefits received on my behalf. What we uncovered left me stunned. My mom, Rachel Hayes, had maintained a modest life insurance policy in my name. On top of that, there was a small inheritance from my maternal grandparents. Money I had never even been told about. Where did it all go? I asked Daniel, my voice shaking. He tapped his pen against the table, his expression grim. "That's exactly what we need to find out. As your guardian, your aunt had a legal duty to manage those funds in your best interest. If she didn't, this is bigger than just a lawsuit. It could be fraud." 2 months after Linda's demand, we received notice of a court date. She was pushing forward, suing me for the full $50,000 plus legal fees. To my surprise, Daniel seemed almost pleased. "Now we'll have discovery," he explained. "That means we can demand access to her financial records." Through formal discovery requests, we obtained bank statements, tax returns, and benefit records tied to Linda's accounts during the years I lived with her. What those records revealed was shocking. Not only had Linda received Social Security survivor benefits of over $1,000 a month, but she had also collected the life insurance payout and inheritance money. The total amount she should have managed for my care, nearly $190,000. Daniel set the papers on the desk and looked at me with steady eyes. She spent all of it. And now she's suing you for more. My stomach dropped as I stared at the figures in front of me. How is that even possible? How could she legally take all that money? Daniel's voice was firm. She couldn't. That's the point. As your guardian, she had a fiduciary duty to use those funds for your direct benefit. Housing, clothing, education, healthcare. Instead, the records show she mixed it with her own household money and used it however she pleased. That's misappropriation. As the trial date approached, my anxiety grew. I tried to balance preparation with starting my new job at Children's Memorial Hospital, but the weight of it all threatened to crush me. Ethan was my anchor, coming with me to every meeting with Daniel, helping me research similar cases, reminding me that I wasn't fighting this alone. The night before trial, I couldn't sleep. Memories of Mom flooded back. Her warm hands checking my forehead when I was sick, her proud smile when I brought home a good grade, her whispered encouragements when life felt too heavy. Lying awake, I whispered into the darkness, "I'm trying to be strong, Mom. I hope you'd be proud of me." The next morning, I dressed carefully. A simple navy dress, low heels, and Mom's pearl earrings. The only jewelry I owned that mattered. Ethan drove me to the courthouse, where Daniel was already waiting on the steps. His confident smile gave me strength. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." The county courthouse was an imposing brick building, its marble columns towering above me. Inside, the ceiling stretched high, every footstep echoing against the polished floors. Ethan and Sophie flanked me as we went through security. Their presence was silent reassurance, reminding me I wasn't alone. Daniel led us to a wooden bench outside courtroom C, where we waited for our case to be called. Across the hall sat Linda, Uncle Thomas, and Brianna, accompanied by their attorney, Mr. Harris, a sleek man in an expensive suit who kept glancing at his gold watch. Linda was dressed in a cream-colored suit that screamed respectable citizen. When our eyes met, she gave me a small, confident smile, the kind that sent chills down my spine. I leaned toward Ethan and whispered. All these years, she made me feel like I was stealing from her. Like every meal, every piece of clothing was too much. And the whole time, Daniel cut in gently but firmly. Don't focus on her. Today is about facts, not feelings. Let the evidence speak. At exactly 9:30, the bailiff called out, Carter versus Hayes. Judge Eleanor Wright presiding. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, with only a handful of spectators scattered on the benches. Judge Wright, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, with streaks of silver in her hair, took her seat at the bench. She nodded briskly as we stood. I've reviewed the filings in this case. She began. Mrs. Linda Carter is suing her niece, Clara Hayes, for reimbursement of child, rearing expenses totaling $50,000 plus legal fees. Miss Hayes has filed a counterclaim. Let's proceed with opening statements. Mr. Harris rose first, buttoning his tailored suit jacket as he walked to the center of the courtroom. His voice was smooth and practiced, meant to charm and persuade. Your Honor, he began, this case is about a woman's sacrifice. My client, Linda Carter, opened her home and her heart when tragedy struck. At just 13 years old, Clara Hayes was left without parents, without support, and without resources. For 5 years, the Carters provided food, shelter, clothing, education, and stability, all at significant personal cost. Today, my client is simply asking for fair reimbursement for those extraordinary expenses. He gestured toward Linda, who sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression a picture of saintly patience. The Carters did this without complaint. Mr. Harris continued. even though it strained their finances. Now that Clara has secured a well-paying job as a nurse, it is only fair that she recognize the sacrifices made for her. Daniel remained calm, jotting down a few notes as Harris concluded and returned to his seat. Then it was his turn. He walked to the bench, his tone steady but cutting. Your Honor, this case is not about a selfless guardian seeking fairness. It is about accountability. Mrs. Carter was entrusted with substantial funds. Social Security survivor benefits, life insurance proceeds, and inheritance money, all meant for Clara's care. Nearly $190,000 in total. Yet Clara was denied basic needs, made to feel like a burden, and even forced to pay rent from her teenage job. Now, unbelievably, Mrs. Carter claims Clara owes her more. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Wright leaned forward slightly, her expression tightening. That is a serious allegation, Counselor. Do you have documentation? Daniel nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And we intend to present every detail. The first witness called was Linda herself. She walked confidently to the stand, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. After being sworn in, she folded her hands neatly in her lap and turned on her most sympathetic expression. Mr. Harris began his questioning. Mrs. Carter, can you tell the court why you took Clara in? Linda sighed dramatically, her eyes glistening with rehearsed emotion. Because she was family. My sister passed away suddenly, and Clara had nowhere else to go. Of course I stepped up. What kind of person would I be if I didn't? And what was that like for your household? Harris prompted. It was difficult. Linda said with a heavy nod. We were already raising our daughter. Adding another teenager doubled the expenses. Food, clothing, medical care, activities. It all added up. But I never complained. I did what was necessary out of love. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, and Brianna, sitting in the gallery, rolled her eyes, as if she had heard this performance many times before. Mr. Harris handed her the invoice she had created. Is this an accurate record of the costs you shouldered? Linda straightened her back. Yes. And frankly, it's conservative. It doesn't include the countless hours I devoted to her well-being. When Harris finished, Daniel stood. His tone was calm, but each question cut through Linda's performance like a blade. Mrs. Carter, did you receive monthly survivor benefits from Social Security while Clara lived with you? Linda hesitated. Yes, but those barely covered groceries. Daniel lifted a document from his folder. Bank statements show deposits of $1,100 every month for 5 years. That totals over $66,000. Would you still call that barely covering groceries? Linda's composure faltered for the first time. Linda shifted in her seat, her confident smile fading slightly. Well, children are expensive. It went quickly. Daniel didn't miss a beat. Let's move on. Did you also receive a life insurance payout after Rachel Hayes passed away? Linda's jaw tightened. A small one, yes. Daniel raised another paper. Bank records show a deposit of $75,000. Do you consider that small? The courtroom stirred with whispers. Judge Wright tapped her gavel once for silence, her eyes narrowing at Linda. Daniel pressed on. And what about the inheritance from Clara's grandparents? $28,000, placed in your account for her benefit. Did Clara ever see a dime of that money? Linda's face flushed. We used it to support the household. Housing utilities. Utilities. Daniel cut in. Because Clara testified that she was required to pay $300 a month in rent from her part-time job while living under your guardianship. If you were receiving nearly $190,000 earmarked for her care, why was she paying you rent? Linda stammered, her words tumbling over each other. We wanted to teach her responsibility. She needed to learn the value of money. Daniel turned to the judge, his voice firm. Your Honor, this is not responsibility. This is exploitation. Clara was deprived of basic needs, while her guardian squandered nearly $200,000, intended solely for her care. And now, instead of accountability, Mrs. Carter is suing her niece for another $50,000. Judge Wright's gaze bore into Linda, who shifted uncomfortably under the weight of the silence that followed. Daniel continued his questioning, his tone sharper now. "Mrs. Carter, can you tell the court what Clara wore to school most days?" Linda blinked. "Clothes. Normal clothes." Daniel glanced at Clara, then back at the judge. "We have testimony from multiple witnesses. Teachers, classmates, even neighbors, who will confirm that Clara wore secondhand clothing, often ill, fitting and worn out, while her cousin Brianna received new designer items each season. Would you like me to call them to the stand?" Linda shifted again, her voice cracking slightly. "We treated them equally. If Clara felt otherwise, that's her perception." Daniel's next question was devastating. Did Clara ever receive braces for her teeth, as recommended by her dentist? Linda looked cornered. "No. It was too expensive." Daniel raised his voice just enough to cut through the air. Too expensive, despite receiving over $190,000 for her benefit. Too expensive, while her cousin had a brand new car for her 16th birthday. Too expensive, while Clara was forced to hand over nearly half her paycheck for rent. Linda's carefully constructed image cracked wide open. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Judge Wright leaned forward, her expression severe. "Mrs. Carter, this court expects honesty. And so far, I see a troubling pattern of mismanagement." Uncle Thomas shifted uncomfortably in the gallery, his eyes fixed on the floor. Brianna crossed her arms and smirked, clearly enjoying her mother's unraveling. For the first time, Linda looked genuinely rattled. Daniel called his next witness, Clara Hayes. My heart pounded as I walked to the stand. The bailiff swore me in, and I sat down, clutching the edges of the chair to steady my shaking hands. Daniel gave me a reassuring nod before starting. "Clara, can you describe what life was like, living with your aunt and uncle after your mother passed?" I took a deep breath, my voice trembling at first. I was 13 when I moved in. From the beginning, I was made to feel like a burden. I was given secondhand clothes, told constantly how expensive I was, and denied things my cousin Brianna got without question. When I started working at a bakery, my aunt demanded I pay her $300 a month in rent. I couldn't keep any of my paycheck. Daniel guided me gently. "Did you ever see any of the benefits your mother left behind? The life insurance, the inheritance, the social security payments?" I shook my head. "No. I didn't even know about most of it until years later, when I found records in my uncle's office. I never received braces, never had new clothes, and I was discouraged from applying to colleges because of the cost." As I spoke, I glanced at the jury. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others scribbled notes, but every eye was fixed on me. Finally, Daniel asked the question that cut to the heart of it all. "Clara, did you ever feel loved or supported in that home?" The lump in my throat nearly choked me, but I forced the words out. "No. I felt like a bill they didn't want to pay. My mom's money was supposed to give me stability, but instead, it became another weapon my aunt used to control me." Silence filled the courtroom. For once, Linda didn't dare meet my eyes. Mr. Harris rose for cross-examination, clearly eager to regain control. "Miss Hayes," he began smoothly, "isn't it true that your aunt provided you with a roof over your head, food on the table, and access to education during your teenage years?" I kept my gaze steady. "She provided the bare minimum while pocketing money meant for me. And even then, I was constantly reminded how much of a burden I was." Harris smirked slightly, turning toward the judge. "So you admit she supported you, even if not in the way you would have preferred?" Daniel objected immediately. "Mischaracterization of testimony." Judge Wright nodded. "Sustained." Rephrase. "Counselor." Harris cleared his throat and tried again. "Miss Hayes, when you say you were denied opportunities, isn't it possible your aunt was simply being practical with limited resources?" I leaned forward, my voice stronger now. "She had nearly $190,000 meant for my care. I wore hand-me-downs and paid her rent, while she redecorated my cousin's bedroom every season and bought her a brand new car. That's not practicality. That's selfishness. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Harris shifted uncomfortably, clearly rattled by my directness. No further questions. As I stepped down from the stand, Daniel gave me a small nod of pride. I knew I had spoken the truth. And the truth was powerful. Daniel called his final witness, Miss Reynolds, my former biology teacher and longtime mentor. She walked confidently to the stand, her posture straight, her voice calm and professional as she was sworn in. Daniel began, "Ms. Reynolds, how long have you known Clara?" "Since she was 14, she replied. "She was one of my top students, determined and hardworking, despite the challenges she faced at home." "Did Clara ever confide in you about those challenges?" Daniel asked. Ms. Reynolds nodded. "Yes. She often stayed late at school to avoid going home. She told me her aunt constantly complained about how expensive she was, and she worried that she might not be able to attend college because her aunt refused to support her applications. I eventually saw enough to believe she wasn't being cared for properly." Daniel handed her a folder. "Did Clara ever share documentation with you regarding the Social Security benefits her aunt was receiving?" "Yes," Ms. Reynolds confirmed, opening the folder. She showed me photographs of statements indicating her aunt was receiving over $1,000 a month for her care. I advised her to keep those records safe. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Finally, Daniel asked, "In your professional opinion, did Clara demonstrate resilience and independence despite those circumstances?" Ms. Reynolds smiled warmly at me before answering. "Absolutely. Clara excelled academically, earned scholarships, and volunteered at the hospital. She achieved everything on her own, with no real support from her guardian. If anything, she succeeded in spite of her aunt, not because of her." The words struck deep, not just for me, but for everyone listening. With the testimony complete, Judge Wright called for closing arguments. Mr. Harris rose first, smoothing his tie and walking deliberately to the center of the courtroom. His voice carried a rehearsed calm. "Your Honor, no one disputes that Clara has worked hard. But the fact remains, she lived under the Carter's roof for years. Food, housing, and other necessities were provided. My client merely seeks reimbursement for expenses that exceeded the government benefits. Family or not, fairness demands acknowledgement of those sacrifices." He gestured toward Linda, who sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "This is not exploitation. This is responsibility. Mrs. Carter stepped in when no one else did. She deserves to be repaid." Then Daniel stood. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of fire. "Your Honor, what we have here is not sacrifice. It is theft wrapped in self-righteousness. Clara's aunt received nearly $190,000, meant exclusively for Clara's care. That money was more than enough for food, clothing, education, and stability. Yet Clara was denied braces, denied opportunities, and even charged rent from her teenage paycheck." He lifted the folder of financial documents. "The records speak louder than words. The money was mismanaged, diverted, and squandered. And now, unbelievably, Mrs. Carter claims she is owed another $50,000. If this court allows such a claim, it sets a dangerous precedent that guardians may exploit children in their care and then demand payment once those children become successful." He turned to me briefly, then back to the judge. "Clara owes her aunt nothing. If anything, her aunt owes Clara restitution for the funds that were stolen. We ask the court to dismiss this outrageous claim and hold Mrs. Carter accountable." The courtroom was silent when he finished. Judge Wright leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes scanning the documents laid before her. The silence stretched so long that I could hear the faint hum of the air vents. Finally, she spoke. "I have heard enough." Her gaze landed squarely on Linda. "Mrs. Carter, the evidence presented shows a consistent pattern of financial mismanagement. You received Social Security benefits, life insurance proceeds, and inheritance funds, totaling nearly $190,000, all earmarked for Clara's care. Yet Clara was denied essential needs and even forced to contribute financially as a minor. That is unacceptable. Linda opened her mouth to speak, but Judge Wright raised a hand sharply. Do not interrupt me. What is most troubling is your audacity to bring this claim at all. To sue the very child you were entrusted to protect, after misusing funds intended for her, is an affront to this court. The room was utterly still. Brianna smirked openly now, clearly enjoying her mother's downfall, while Uncle Thomas kept his eyes glued to the floor. Judge Wright's voice carried finality. This court dismisses the plaintiff's claim in its entirety. Furthermore, given the documentation provided, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential investigation into misappropriation of funds. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Linda's face went pale. Judge Wright looked at me, her tone softening. Miss Hayes, you owe your aunt nothing. This case is closed. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. Linda sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, as the reality of Judge Wright's ruling sank in. Brianna leaned back in her seat with a smug grin, while Uncle Thomas shuffled awkwardly, avoiding everyone's eyes. Ethan squeezed my hand, whispering, It's done. You're free. As we stepped out of the courthouse, the weight I had carried for nearly a decade seemed to lift all at once. The sky felt brighter, the air sharper, as though the world itself was reminding me that I had survived. Daniel joined us outside, shaking my hand firmly. You stood your ground, Clara. And because of that, justice was served. If the DA pursues this, your aunt may face consequences. But no matter what happens, remember this, you don't owe her a thing. You never did. Tears filled my eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't from pain. They were from relief. Later that evening, surrounded by Sophie, Ethan, the Kims, and the Lawsons, I raised a glass of sparkling cider. To Mom, I said softly. To the life she wanted for me, and to the family I've chosen. They clinked their glasses against mine, their smiles warm and genuine. For so long, Linda had made me believe I was nothing more than a burden, a debt to be repaid. But standing there, with love and support surrounding me, I finally understood the truth. I was not a debt. I was not a burden. I was my mother's daughter. And I had built a life she would be proud of. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest revenge.